Hello and welcome to Magical Travel Adventure. I am Lauren, your host, and today we are going to talk about my recent Alaskan cruise. It was very exciting, a lot of fun, and I have a lot of information for you if you are planning on going on an Alaskan cruise and just some good information that might help you. If you don't know her, this is your first time here. I am Lauren. I'm a travel advisor. My information is below if you need help booking your next Alaskan cruise. And let's get started. So, if you've never been on an Alaskan cruise, there's a lot of information that you might want to know. And I'm going to talk about my trip kind of like I would going over it and give you some tips and tricks along the way. I'm trying not to make this like an old-fashioned like slideshow, like, oh, this is what we did. But it's kind of hard not to because when you go to Alaska, there is so much you want to share. And your pictures and your video never quite capture everything that you really want to share with people because seeing it in person is amazing. I was surprised at how much I just wanted to look outside. It's very different from other cruises where you might just be on nice water and yeah, you might see some islands in the distance and yeah, that's great. This is pretty much for the most part, most of the time you are seeing land and you are seeing gorgeous mountains pass you by and the sky is just gorgeous. Like there's no other way to describe it. And you just want to be looking outside all the time. I would get so mad at my husband for closing the curtains at night because I was like, no, let's leave them open so that we can see everything that we're passing, like as we're trying to go to sleep. But it didn't always work out that way. So, who went on this trip? I went on this trip with my husband and my 4-year-old son, and my mom and my aunt. My mom and my aunt had their own room, and we were in our own room also. My son, my husband, and I. We were in a. We went on a Royal Caribbean ship, Serenade of the Seas, and it left out of Vancouver. So we live in New England. We left from Connecticut and we flew to Vancouver. We decided to leave 2 days earlier. And I will say that this was in 2022. And when we decided this, flights were not consistent. Specifically, Air Canada was really struggling at the time. And we actually are really grateful that we did leave on the Friday because we hit some snafus along the way, but it all worked out. So when we left about midday on Friday. And I will say we had to do COVID tests and all that stuff. I'm hoping that by the time you go to Alaska, that's not a thing. But we had to do my son's PCR test Thursday before we left. And then my husband and I had to do our online tests from home before we left. Obviously, we all came out negative. Yes, it was a super nerve-wracking event because if one of us obviously tested positive, that would have been an issue. But we really tried to stay away from people and not do things for that whole like 10 days beforehand to really make sure that we were safe. And then we got on our flight, and our flight left out of Hartford and it was delayed. And it's fine that it was delayed, but it was like really cutting it close. And every single person there was making a connection because no one's ultimate goal on our flight was trying to just go to Toronto. So we were all catching other flights, and they had already changed our flights flying out. They had changed the times or they had canceled the flight. So we were at a later flight. And I always try and get the earliest flight out because then there's less chance for delays. So we left about 2 hours late, which gave us about like 30 minutes when we got to Toronto to get through customs and get to our flight, which was in, of course, a totally different wing of the airport. So when we Got off I should actually say too, we did all carry-ons for this trip. At this time, going through Toronto, you did not have luck with checked luggage, so we did not check a bag. We each had our own carry-on suitcase and our own personal item. My personal item might have been a little larger than my actual carry-on, but it all worked out. And we got on the flights, but with our first plane, it was such a small plane that they actually took our bags, our roller bags, and when we got off the plane, we had to grab them. So that was a little challenging in itself, just because that was an extra step before we could get to customs. So we got our bags, and my poor son did such a good job. He's 4 years old, and he was just running through this airport with us because we really, really, really wanted to make obviously our next flight. And my son did such a good job running through this airport trying to get to customs. So we get to customs, and this is the weirdest experience. So at this point, we had to use ArriveCam, which meant that we had to upload our passports, upload a picture, take a picture of our vaccination cards, and do all this stuff and check in to ArriveCam 72 hours before our flight, not earlier, not later. It was very, very challenging. And then you wait in this line to check in to customs. So we got through the line. It looked super long. I thought there's no way we're going to make it. And we made it through in about 15 minutes. And I would say that it was there were 6 rows that we had to get through. And then there are all these machines, like if you were going to check out at a grocery store. And then you go up to one of those when they call you, once you get through the line, and you go to one of those kiosks. So then at the kiosk, you have to recheck in, almost like you didn't do ArriveCam at all. And you have to scan your passport, and then it has to take your picture. And then you have to scan the next person's passport and take your picture. And then you get this receipt, like a CVS receipt, clearly. And it's super long. And then you wait in another line to talk to a human being. So then we talk to a human being, and they're like, "How long are you here for?" I'm like, "A day. We're leaving tomorrow, Sunday for our cruise." And they're like, "Okay, bye." And they let us go. But then we have to go to the next person. They're like, "Okay, show me your passport. Okay, show me your tickets. Okay, you can go." And then the next person, "Where are you coming from?" And I was like, "How many people do we have to get through for customs to show this?" And some people were having a really tough time. They didn't speak English and they didn't speak French and they didn't know what they had to provide. So this really slowed us down. So now we've gotten through the 3 different human beings we needed to through customs, and now we are racing to get to our plane. And in the meantime, I'm getting text messages from Air Canada saying, "We're boarding, you should be here by now. You're boarding, you should be here by now." So we run, run, run. We're running by A&W, we're running by Tim Hortons, all things my husband and I thought we would be able to grab before we got on this plane, but no such luck. And we get to the plane, and of course, every time we got on a plane, it was all the way at the end of a corridor, all the way, every single time. Every plane we got for this trip, it was all the way at the end of the corridor. So I knocked over my water, don't worry. So then we go and we get in line, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you could have gotten on earlier." Okay, whatever. We're just trying to get on. And since we each have a bag to bring on, I was really nervous that we weren't going to get our bags on, but we did. We actually beat a bunch of people there because their planes were late. So we got on and this plane was a really nice plane. This was probably like the largest plane I had. I think it was 333. So there was middle lanes there. We had tried to get economy, I don't know, business economy, I don't know what it's called. But we couldn't, even when I booked, because they had changed our flights, they couldn't guarantee that we were all sitting together. And I didn't want my son not sitting with one of us. And we could not even get 2 seats together with business economy. So that was not an option. And first class was sold out before we even got on the flight. So whatever, we just did economy for this flight and it was fine. We actually had the 3 rows and we had some space in the back of us if we really needed it. And it did kind of help us out because we did have space, and it was a really nice plane. It was a new plane. And I am going to show you some stuff from this because I will say that I really enjoyed this flight because I thought that it had amazing views. And this is just like one of the views as we're flying. And obviously we're getting closer to the Vancouver part here. It was almost a 5-hour flight for us when we were going over, and this is through a window, so obviously, some glare. But the seeing the mountains here, it like just got you so excited about getting to Vancouver and like so excited for Alaska. So this part was super, super exciting for us. Like we were looking out the window all the time and so excited. And of course, we arrive and there is a time difference. So there's a 3-hour time difference. And that's why we actually wanted to go earlier because our ship left on Sunday, but we arrived kind of Friday night-ish, and we just kind of went to bed when we got there. And then the next day on Saturday, we kind of explored Vancouver. Not as much as we wanted to because we were so jet lagged. So this is when we came from our hotel and we walked down. This is like kind of near where the seaport is. So there are other things here. We almost took one of these seaplanes. I thought I could maybe get my husband up. My husband maybe thought he could get me up in one. And I do like these seaplanes. You see them taking off and landing all the time. They're really cool. It's definitely something if you're in Vancouver and you want to do something fun, this would definitely be something fun to do. So that's what we did is we didn't actually take one, but we went down here and we looked and we kind of walked around with my son, but he was really feeling it by like 10 o'clock in the morning. So we actually took him back for a nap. And of course he took some like epic nap all the way until like 3 p.m. So there were a lot of things that we didn't end up doing in Vancouver that day. And that's fine because we went early for my son. The point was to get there to kind of get him in a new place, in a hotel, and just kind of like settled in this new place and kind of getting him adjusted to the time change. We weren't really concerned about looking at Vancouver and walking around Vancouver. That was like an added bonus if we got to. And my husband and I kind of got to walk around a little bit of midtown-ish area, and down by the seaport. But we really didn't get to explore Vancouver. It was a wonderful city. It's definitely someplace we want to explore more, but at this point, we really didn't have that opportunity to do it. And I would say if you have smaller kids and you're dealing with a time change, that might be something to think about. Or if you're someone who's like really into their sleep, you might want to think about that too. So that's all we did. So then the next day, we kind of go to the seaport. And I'm going to show you the seaport in the next slide to kind of understand what it looks like because it might look different from other things that you've seen before. Sorry, I went backwards. So here we are at the seaport. This is one of the ships. It was not our ship. And then this is Canada Place where the port is. And then actually up above is one of the hotels. And you can kind of see the name, the Pacific Hotel is over there. So if you're staying in Vancouver, obviously you want to stay a night ahead of time. So finding that right hotel for you is going to be important and you need to decide what it is that you want. Obviously having one that's right at the port is super, super helpful. So you just have to kind of decide that. When you come here, if you're just walking in, you will walk in to this area. It kind of shows where to walk in for a cruise. There are usually multiple cruises boarding on the same day. So you need to know your cruise line and your cruise name of your ship. They ask for your ship name more often than they will for your cruise line. So make sure you know that. Sometimes there are two ships of the same brand there, like two princess ships, not often, but it could happen. And they just are trying to make sure that you know how to do that. Now, because my son was under 5, he also had to get COVID tested that day. So across the street from here is where we had to get COVID test. I had to make an appointment. I had to pay for it. And he and I went that morning, got the COVID test. Obviously it was fine because we made it on cruise. And they were super, super nice. I learned also that maybe in Canada, they're not used to people arriving before a time opens because my son and I arrived about 10 minutes before they opened. And they kept saying, like, we're not open yet, right? I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I'll just sit here and wait with him. I don't care. So we sat there. What happens is they call you in. I had pre-registered, and it was like I didn't pre-register at all. That seemed to be like a theme of the trip. I pre-registered and it meant nothing. So had to go through all the information again, show all the passports, show my COVID card, and then I could sign him up to get his COVID test. Then I actually gave him his COVID test, and we waited there. It took about 12 minutes. Then they hand me a piece of paper saying it's negative, and then we go. So we left, and then we packed up our stuff, and we actually kind of relaxed because there was like not like a lot to do at that point. And we ended up taking we were not staying down at the port. My goal was not to stay at the port because I wanted to see more of Vancouver and get in that city center. And guess what? We didn't get to see that much, but my mom and my aunt did, and they really liked it. So we took an Uber over there, and we got right in. We went in the parking garage below, and then they took our luggage in the parking garage, and then we walked to where you check in for Serenade of the Seas. And what happens is you walk through, and they have a special area for families with kids under 12, because that means someone is not vaccinated, and you check in, and there's a little extra check-in because of how it all works. So you hand your papers, talk to people, and then you get on the ship. Now, getting on the Serenade of the Seas was not very exciting. You walked in a hallway that, if you've never been on a cruise before, it's basically a warehouse, a glorified warehouse, I'll say. And you walk down a hall, and then you walked on this little gangway here, and you walked into like where the like a very low ceiling, and you just kind of walked in. If you've ever been on like a Disney ship, it's like very grand and opening, and you open into the atrium, and it's very grand. It was not grand. That's why I have no video or picture of it, because I kept waiting for this grand moment, and we just like walked onto the ship. It was like walking into like your living room. It was not very exciting. So I keeps going back. I don't know why. Um, all right, so this is what our ship looked like. It's not what it looked like at the dock. I forgot to take a picture of it when I was at the dock. So this was somewhere in Juneau where I actually took a picture of our ship, and we were right here on our ship, right where that dot and arrow is. We had that balcony stateroom right there, and I can tell by the curve of the ship, I can count back where we were. That's how I know. But this was our ship, Serenade of the Seas. And I'll talk a little bit about Serenade of the Seas. But what I want to talk about is when you go to Alaska, what does it really look like? So we came out of Vancouver, and we were doing an inside passage. This is a very common way to travel to Alaska. So if I'm going to Vancouver, I am going on this inside part of Vancouver, and then up here where we went to Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, and Sitka, and then we came back all the way to Vancouver. That's inside passage. If you are leaving from Seattle, you are coming out here, and maybe you're starting at Sitka, Skagway, Juneau, Ketchikan. I'm not sure. There's so many different ways. What I'm trying to show you is that if you are coming from Vancouver, you are coming into this space where there is land on both sides. So the water is not as choppy. Here it gets a little choppier. And then obviously when you come up to Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, and Sitka, you're really controlled. When you leave Sitka, you're going out into that open water again. And I'm pretty sure we did this when we came back. Again, open water, and then back into Vancouver. And I say that because open water means choppiness. And if you get seasick, this is where you're going to get seasick. I did not feel it going out, but when we came back from Sitka, I did feel it. And it was hard for me. If you're coming from Seattle, you only have a little bit of that morning or that day that you have this space, and then you are out there in the ocean. So it's going to be much rougher if you leave out of Seattle. And I'm saying that if you are trying to make a decision about your cruise, that if you are concerned about getting seasick, I would really say that it is a smoother journey if you leave from Vancouver than it is from Seattle. Just a helpful hint. So when you leave Vancouver, it's amazing. It's not like any other place where I've left. Normally, I want to do like the sail away party or things like that. And here in Vancouver, like I just wanted to be out on our balcony. It was so amazing. We went under this bridge. Like you don't normally go under that many bridges as a cruise ship. So this was an amazing experience. And you just the whole trip, all you wanted to do was look out the window. It was just look out the window, look out the window. I want to see what's going on outside. What's going on outside? I got to see. And we stayed out here right until as long as we could until we had to go to dinner. So this was an awesome experience. We really loved going underneath the bridge. And when we came back, we were like super excited. We're like, oh, we get to go under the bridge. So just know that when you leave Vancouver, you really get to kind of see a lot. You can really see some mountains. There were mountains that I couldn't see from when we were on land. So understand that, yes, you get to go under this bridge. It's super cool. And it's like one of the fun experiences when you leave Vancouver. And everyone who had a balcony stateroom, everyone was out there. We were all taking pictures and we were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So that was going, leaving out of Vancouver. And then this was like probably like 2 hours later. It was just so cool to see all these like mountains here. Like it's like it never ended. And it's really hard to explain to people, but it's fine. So this is what our stateroom looked like. And no, I did not get any good pictures of it before it got really dirty and we put a bunch of our stuff out. So I was not good with that. This is a view from our balcony. And then this is our room. So this couch here turned into a bed for my son. And there was another bed that could have popped down if we had needed it. This seemed to be a king size bed for my husband and I. We both talked about this bed continuously, about how great it was. But that's probably where it stopped in the room. The room was very dated. I would say overall, Serenaded Seas was a very dated ship. I think I looked back and it hasn't been refurbished for 10 years. And it's very hard because, if you've been on newer ships and things like that, there's a lot of newer things that you expect. There are 2 plugs in this room total, and they are both over here. There are no plugs in the bathroom whatsoever. So as a woman, that was super hard for me because I had to do my hair like out here sitting at this table every day. So that was complicated, and charging stations, things like that. Definitely needed more plugs to make it usable. There was definitely enough space. We could fit our suitcases under the bed. But it was fine. The bathroom was pretty small. But it worked for us. So it was fine. I liked that it's all in one. In Disney, they have those like split bathrooms, and I do not like that at all. I just want one bathroom all together. But this was really nice. So this was the atrium, and this was kind of cool because the elevators were either looking in on the atrium or they were outside looking at the ship, and that was cool. And this is one of the spaces that we really liked. It was the Safari Lounge, and it was all the way at the back of the boat, and we would come back here and sit and just watch as we would pass everything by. And it was a great place to be inside because it was very cold actually the first couple of days that we were on the ocean, which I think is pretty normal. But I would say it was like 50s outside, 60s, and obviously there's wind because you are traveling by boat and going somewhere. So we spent a lot of time. Our first day was a day to sea, and we spent a lot of time in the Safari Lounge. It's windy. Did I mention it's windy? So bring your comb because I experienced a lot of wind on this trip. Now, another thing that happened is if you've ever been on a cruise ship, some people bring rubber ducks to hide. And then you can find them throughout the ship. And my son found the tiniest one ever inside this light at the Safari Lounge. So I was just trying to give you a model. Like we're supposed to be looking for like big rubber ducks. And my son found this tiny, tiny rubber duck. So that's just a mom brag there. End of story. So our first day at Ward Cove was at Ketchikan, and we were at Ward Cove, which is about 15 minutes away from where the main ships dock. And this is what I'll say is when you go to Alaska and you book with a certain cruise line, you have to understand that different cruise lines have different access in Alaska. So Princess and Holland America are like the staples of Alaska. They have been there the longest. They have the most push. They have the most influence to get to the best ports and have the best port places. So understand that as we were on Royal Caribbean, and I knew this going into it, that we were not going to be at the best places when we docked. And I totally understood that. And I knew that we were going to have some challenges with docking and getting off and having to travel. And I knew that ahead of time. But if that is something that is important to you, you want to make sure that you pick the right cruise line that's going to get you to where you want to go for those docks. I was actually kind of glad we went to Ward Cove because when we got into Ward Cove, that was a Norwegian ship and a Royal ship. There was like this warehouse of all this stuff, and it was actually really put together quite nicely. So they had a restaurant there, they had stuff you could buy, they had different people in the area. We got to meet an Iditarod dog while we were there. So it definitely was a good place for us to stop. Like we liked it. And then when we were in Ketchikan, we were supposed to have an excursion this day with the lumberjacks, but it got canceled. And when we tried to rebook it, it just wasn't working for us. Again, another issue with being on Royal Caribbean is they don't have access to all of those first choices that you would get for excursions like that. So understand that. So we just walked around Ketchikan, and of course, I had to go to the captain's lady to see Jamie's shop. If you didn't know, Jamie has been on the podcast before talking about the captain's lady. Definitely a place you want to go on Creek Street. It's super famous in Ketchikan, and it's great. Ketchikan is a great port. I will do videos on each port that we went to. It's too hard to really describe everything that happens at each port in a short amount of time, especially when I'm doing this fun slideshow thing. So the next day was our Tracy Arm Fjord and Sawyer Glacier. And we were going to go to Juneau. So what this means is in the morning, we are going in a cruise ship and we're going into the Tracy Arm Fjord and we're going to get to see the Sawyer Glacier from the cruise ship. So this typically happens. This was from, I think, 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. in the morning. So we went and we could see this. These were pictures taken outside of my balcony. So there was a lot that we could see on our balcony, but we didn't want to just stay in our balcony because we wanted to be able to see like above us and whatnot. So we went out onto the main area so that we could see the Sawyer Glacier. This is about as close as we got to the Sawyer Glacier. You don't get super close to it, but you get close enough so that you can see it and you see all the fjords. No pictures, no words can describe what it is. It is the most amazing experience. It was by far the best part about the trip. Seeing a glacier like this is just so amazing, and there's nothing else to describe it. Words are not going to describe it. I do want to have an honest conversation about what it looked like on that deck. So on the Serenade of the Seas in the front, it's on deck 6. There's like an opening part. They'll say it's like a helicopter pad. But really what it is it's for Alaska so that people can stand out there and see this stuff. The fjords and the obviously whatever's going past us in the glacier. So there are lots of people that are up on board at this time. There are places inside that you can see and that you could look out. My mom and my aunt actually stayed in their rooms and they were able to see because the boat turned when we got to the glacier and they could see the glacier perfectly from their room, from the from outside. So that's it. So this is a non-zoomed out picture. This is a zoomed in picture, just so you can see. You can get your shots though, so don't worry. Like you could take your picture, but like I'm saying, it's more fun to just like watch and see it than it is to take the pictures. Like you haven't seen anything like this before. My husband and I have been to Norway where we've seen fjords before, and this was very different. The color of the water, you cannot describe it. The pictures do not make it clear how wonderful it really is. So, what's challenging about this day, which from the very beginning when I booked this trip, was that Juneau was also our port that day. And Juneau was the one port that I wanted a long time at port. And of course, it was a long time at port, but it wasn't like a full day at port because we didn't get to Juneau till about 1 o'clock. And this was sort of an issue for me the whole time because Juneau was the one place that I really wanted to go and I really wanted to check out the town and I never got to. And it like I'm still like maybe I could just fly to Juneau for the weekend just so I can like look at the town. But again, when you're booking an Alaskan cruise, there are cruise lines that have better port times and longer port times than others. So if that's something that's important to you, just know that. And I know that this is not my last Alaskan cruise. This is not the last time I will go to Alaska. So, you know, I looked at it as I wanted to get on this cruise so that I could see what it was like and what I could tell people about it so that you could better prepare for yourself. And I would say if Alaska is your one and only time, I would not pick Royal Caribbean to go on your cruise. I would pick another cruise line. And yes, it might be more expensive, but if this is your one time to see it, there is a great way to see Alaska. This is also a great way to see Alaska. I'm not saying like you're missing out on anything, but you just might not have the time you want in the ports. So here at Juneau, what we ended up doing, we got there at 1, and we got to our excursion, and so we got off, we got on the bus, and we ended up going to the Mendenhall Glacier. Got to see that. We didn't have a lot of time there. Again, I knew our time constraint would be kind of an issue, so we got the Mendenhall Glacier. Then we went on an Allen Marine tour to see whales. And so I was super excited. They were really awesome on this ship. Um, and I will show you, these are the whales. And if you can see, there are seagulls around there, and then you'll see the whale tail. So the big hint that they told us on the boat is when you typically see the birds go closer to the water, that is signaling to you that the whales are coming. Now, I don't have fantastic pictures or a video of this. One, because I was really trying to pay attention and you really had to pay attention. And I didn't want to always be taking pictures and video the whole time. So this is what it is. The other thing I will say is we had to make all our cruise reservations through Royal Caribbean at the time of booking and booking our excursions. At that time, anyone non-vaccinated had to have an excursion to get off the ship. So we had an excursion at every place. Most of them got canceled, but this one did not. So we ended up, the rules changed later on. So we could have done one that was not through the cruise line. I'm kind of glad for the first time that I did it just through the cruise line because there was a lot of stuff going on. You had to take buses from Mendenhall Glacier to the seaport where we got on with the whales and then back to port. And I will say it was really hard for me because we didn't get to go into Juneau downtown. And that is something that I think everyone should do. It's like a really great place and there's so many places to go. The Caribou Crossing, like I really wanted to get there and I did not get to go to any of the shops. And it was just the timing and when our ship left. So just understand if you make excursions and you really want to see the town, you might not get to see the town in that way. So our day ended kind of late. I don't think we got back till 7:30, and then we had to eat. And the next day we had an early morning. So again, being on Royal Caribbean, this was one of the concerns that I had was we actually went to Haines the following day. but we had the option to take a bunch of different excursions to go to Skagway. Now, I almost didn't pick this cruise specifically because of this that we were stopping at Haines. And not that I didn't like Haines, but I knew that for this cruise we wanted to go to Skagway. And I knew that we were going to have to take a boat to get to Skagway. So I booked the excursion in Skagway through Royal Caribbean to take a train. There's a train ride in Skagway that I wanted to take, and so I booked that excursion, and I made sure to book it through the cruise line, and it's the White Pass train. And if you this is the only time that I knew we absolutely had to book through the cruise line because I was not sure if we were going to make it back in time. The time in port and the time for the actual excursion were the exact same time, meaning like we were going to be in port from 6:30 to 3 p.m. and our excursion was 6:30 to 3 p.m. And I was like, "Oh, okay. If you book an excursion through a cruise line, through the cruise line that you're on, that means that you're guaranteed that they will wait for you if your excursion is late. If you book an outside excursion, they do not wait for you. If you're late back, like, too bad, we tried. We waited for a few minutes and we left without you. And so I knew for this excursion, it was about a 45-minute boat ride from Haines to Skagway. So I knew that we had to book it through the cruise line. So sometimes for Alaska, you might want to book it through the cruise line because it will make your life a little easier about making sure you're back on time. Now with Haines, Haines has very difficult tides. So low tides can be lower than normal. And so we had to tender off the boat for Haines, and we had to actually get off the boat earlier than we were supposed to dock. This was not a good morning for us. We had been up late the night before. We had to get up super early and be ready the next day. So we had to tender, which means we have to get off on our boat. We have to get onto this small yellow and white black boat. And then that boat takes us to our boat that we're actually going to take to Skagway. This was like the longest process I've ever seen to get from one boat to another. We're talking about 20 feet. Okay. We had to go 20 feet on this yellow boat to get to our next boat. And it took over an hour for us to do this. So it was a long time and people were not happy. So we finally get onto the boat that's going to take us to Skagway and we take off, and it's super, as you can see in the picture, it was super, super misty and foggy. And I was kind of nervous because we had really good weather. We had no rain the entire time on our trip. And I was nervous. This train ride, the whole point of it is to get the views and see everything. And the fog did end up lifting while we were in Skagway, but got into Skagway. It was kind of like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, because we were so late at this point. So as soon as we got off the ship, we had to get to these buses that took us again 2 minutes away. I'm like, it would have been faster if we had just walked, but whatever. So we took these buses to the train station, got on the train, sat on the train. We were all set. And then we had to report back at 2 o'clock. And I was like, 2 o'clock? We can't report back at 2 o'clock. Like, we're supposed to be getting back on our ship by 3 o'clock. So that made me a little nervous. But the guy kept saying, like, they're going to hold a boat for you, the Serenade of the Seas boat for you. So don't worry. So we did the train ride, and the train ride was good in Skagway. This is kind of what it looks like, what a train, one of the cars looks like. If you're with other people, it's easy. You can all get together and you can all sit in a train car. They did offer us water along the way, so we had that. And this is just one of the views that you will see. If you're going to go on it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. You want to see the train, the White Pass train. Then we went into the town. How did it go all the way back there? It really likes going back there. Sorry, you're re-seeing. It's going back again. Here we go. I'm getting it. So then we go into the town, and the town is it's a very easy walkable town that you can get around everywhere. There are places to eat, places to buy souvenirs. And as you can see at the end of the road, this is where some of the other cruise ships dock. So the cruise ships that had docked there that day were a Holland American ship and a Disney ship. So there was another Royal Caribbean ship, but it did not get to go into port. It had to tender also. So understand that depending on your ship, you might just be walking off. And I would say I think we would have enjoyed Skagway a lot more if we could have just walked off the ship, enjoyed the town, and gotten back on. I think the tendering and the journey to get there was almost too much at that point, and we were already tired from the day before of Juneau. So something to think about when you're looking at itineraries and what it looks like. So the next day, we did make it back, by the way. We did make it back, obviously, but we made it back past the time we were supposed to be on the ship. So we had to hurry up, get off the ship, and get back on. So take a boat back from Skagway to Haines, never saw Haines, and then get back on the Serenity to the Seas. And then we actually ended up leaving almost an hour later because it wasn't just our excursion, there were other excursions through the cruise ship that were so late because of the tide. When we got back to Haines, we did not need to take a small tender boat to get back onto Serenity of the Seas. They were able to dock at that point, so we were able to just walk on the ship. So that was appreciated at that time of the day. So this was our last stop was Sitka, and I had nothing planned for this day. I originally had something planned where we were going to do a tour to see some animals along in this area, but I knew at this point that we were going to be exhausted just knowing my family. And so I did not book an excursion. I actually canceled that excursion for the day. I would say if you're going to Sitka that I would book one of those excursions. They have really cool ways that you can see things. They have a totem park that you could go to, and there are so many great excursions in Sitka that if you're going to Sitka, I would definitely plan an excursion. When we got off, again, we were nowhere near a town, so we would need to take a free shuttle to go into the downtown Sitka area. But they did have like a built up area, again, with shops and some place to eat at Sitka. Very nicely built, really cool. I really liked it. Um, so I really liked it. This is the church that everyone always talks about. Sitka was the Russian capital before it was an American place, a part of the United States. So that is a big part of it. This is kind of what the downtown area looked like. The street was under construction, so please don't judge it. It's just like everywhere else in the United States. What we found here in Sitka was a lot of things were not open when we got to port. So we had to wait a little while until things were open. So I think that's why an excursion might be better to start your day and then try and do some of the shops. This was the built up area for the port. We did take a bus. It was about 15 minutes one way to get from the port down to like the downtown area, which was walkable, but not, I mean, it was walkable. There was just a few parts where you really had to cross the street. So this was a good place to go shopping if you are interested in shopping and things like that. And then we ended up getting onto the boat much earlier than we had anticipated because we were just so tired and we just needed to rest at this point. And Sitka, we were actually not there for that long. I think we had to be back on the boat by 1 o'clock. So we got back on the boat right around 11 o'clock and we went up to have lunch in Windjammers, which is the buffet. And they had this gigantic cake sitting out there. And we actually never got a bite of it because they were just showing it to us at lunchtime. But it was just really cool. We really enjoyed the buffet for lunch. There was something for everyone. I have a shellfish allergy, so there were a few times where I couldn't eat certain things. My husband one day had gotten me a salad, and I started eating it, and there was seafood in it, and I was like, "What the heck?" Um, so, and they were pre-made. Some of the times they have pre-made salads put out there. That's what it was. So if you have an allergy, you just need to be aware that you need to know what your allergy is at the buffet, because they're not going to make it separate for you. You just have to be careful on that. So then we had another sea day, and I will say that when we left Sitka, I had been wearing the patch behind my ear that helps with seasickness, and I had taken it off, I don't know, sometime after Juneau, because I was like, it makes you super thirsty. It dehydrates you. And I took off the patch and I was like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Well, when we left Sitka, I was like, oh, maybe I should put it back on. I'm like, oh, I'll be okay. Definitely should have put it back on, because we're in that open water, and it was really choppy. That was the only time I felt it, and it was only for about 4 hours, but I just couldn't recover from it. And I didn't make it to dinner that night because of it. I just needed, if I was laying down, I was fine, and I actually fell asleep for a little bit, and then I felt much better. And I had put the patch back on. So if you're going on an Alaskan cruise, you just want to make sure that you have the stuff that will help you if you are going to get seasick, and that you know when those times are going to be. It's really that open water time. So that sail day back, after all your excursions, when you're in that area of the Inside Passage, you're okay, because there's so much land there that there's only so much that can happen. These are just pictures of the sunset, of or sunrise the next morning. It was gorgeous. It's just so cool to be able to see it. Especially, like, it was so cool with these clouds. There's no way to capture what it was like. It was just amazing. And then just some final thoughts. This picture here is from my bed. This is what we could look out and see when I was laying down. So I really think a balcony stateroom is, I don't want to say a necessity, because it's not a necessity, but I really suggest it. There's just so much to see. It's not like any other cruise that you're going to go on. This is one where I think a balcony is really a necessity. I'll also talk about the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi does not work on this ship. um, I went to go talk to the person of Serenaded Seas about the Wi-Fi, and the fact that they even charge people for Wi-Fi is not okay. It was horrible. It did not work. I could not even open an email when we were out to sea. I would have to wait till we were in port to do anything. The online app, I was also kind of disappointed in the online app, because the online app didn't even work on the ship. You would try and do something and you couldn't do it. There is an online chat feature that is through the app that was previously free. And when we got on this ship, it said that it was $1.99 a day. And we were like, well, how else are we going to talk to each other if we don't have this? So we bought this, I don't know what it was, like $15, so we could chat to each other through the app all day. And the problem is unless you're in the app, you don't know if someone sent you a message or not. So, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't work. It was just, it was so unreliable. So it was very disappointing. This is the ship that they use to go around the world in. And I would be very concerned going around the world in a ship that has unstable internet and doesn't have an app that works. Like, if there was going to be a message, there should be something that like shows, like notifies you in some way. So those are things that Royal Caribbean really needs to work on for this ship. And something that you should really know, that like I had promised my husband that he could do work on this ship. He could not do work on this ship at all. Even in the business center, it's not like it worked any better. And my husband will tell you there are no plugs on this ship anywhere where you go. There is 0 plugs. The only plugs you will find in this cruise ship are in your room, and there's 2 of them. So just be aware of that if you're going to take Serenaded Seas. Now, what I will say is, this is on most cruise ships, is by the elevators, especially the center elevators, they will have these signs that will tell you aft, forward. Aft is going to the back of the boat, forward is going to the front of the boat. And then it will have like a little map of what is happening on the ship. So you can see, and it will tell you like if you go this way, you can go to the dining room. And if you go this way, you can get to all the stores. So this is helpful for you. I will say the elevators were very unreliable. They were always being used. We mostly used the stairs all the time that were right next door. We were right in the center of the ship, so we didn't need, and I would always say to be as close to the center of the ship as possible so that you are closer to the stairs. And my mom and my aunt did the stairs the whole time too. So we did obviously finally get off the ship. And getting off the ship was much easier. I think we were off in our car, in our private car within an hour. And then we were at the airport. We had a day hotel at the Fairmont at the Vancouver airport. And I do recommend that they do have day passes if you need them. And my mom and my aunt actually stayed overnight because their flight was the next morning. This is just a picture of all our luggage as we, this was just all our luggage because this was all our carry-on stuff. And this is just a picture from the Fairmont looking out onto the runway as we were sitting there. So it was definitely a fantastic trip. Our trip home was not so great. Our flight got delayed in Vancouver. We got through and got finally onto our flight. About 2 hours later, we got into Toronto at like 2 a.m, got into our hotel. The check-in experience at the hotel, it was I think it was the Sheraton that was at the Toronto airport. The check-in process was horrible. I should have been just able to go to the room, and I was not able to. We had a club room, and the person didn't give me club access. Um, I really would not actually recommend the Sheraton at the Toronto airport with the experience that I had. It was not great. There is another hotel that is not as nice, a little further off, and I don't know. I don't know if I could recommend the Sheraton to anyone at the Toronto airport. And it might just be in 2022. It might improve as time goes on. The room was fine, but we had a short time there. But our flight was delayed, so we got some extra time in the Toronto airport. The club lounge was, I don't know, sort of pointless. There really wasn't anything there. There was barely food there. We did not have any good experience in Toronto, so it might be better if we had a different experience, but our time in Toronto and the Toronto airport, it was not good. So just know that if you're flying through Toronto, it might not be the best experience that you've ever experienced. We finally did get down to where our gate was, and there was just nothing there. It was just a gate, and it was like a 7-minute walk back to get to anything. Um, our flight was just delayed over and over and over again. And we finally got on our flight, and our flight was just not good. But we got home and we had a great time. So, wow, I've talked for a long time about our trip. But that in a nutshell is our Alaskan cruise. It was a lot of fun. We had so much fun. If I was going again, I probably would not take Serenade of the Seas. What I would take is either a Princess, a Holland America, or a Disney ship. I kind of sway away from the Disney ships or the Disney Wonder that is up there, because I didn't want us to feel like we were missing out stuff on the ship. And especially for my husband, like he is okay with Disney, but he doesn't want Disney stuff all the time. And I think about like the meals and how rotational dining works and how stressed we would have been if we had missed a rotational dining, or how we would have felt that we needed to do rotational dining all the time. I think we went to the dining room 3 of the nights. And the rest of the time we just did the buffet. We just don't always like to sit, especially with our son, as much like as a full day. you just want the buffet sometimes. So that was an option. Oh, I never talked about it, but we did end up going to Chops for lunch one day, which is the specialty restaurant. I'll have to put that in another video for you, but it was fine. So you can kind of decide if you want those specialty dining reservations or not. Obviously, we had my son, so we did not do a lot of the late night stuff. But my husband did go out a few of the times when my son and I were asleep, and he said there are a lot of things going on late at night. So there are still things available later at night if you are there. I would say most of these people stayed up later at night. Things that were early in the morning, there were very few people in the morning in having breakfast or getting off the ship like we were. Most people were getting off a little later than we were. So, I definitely recommend if you are afraid of being seasick to go out of Vancouver and not Seattle if possible. And if that's not possible, you want to try and get in the middle of the ship best you can. And you want to try and get something from your doctor. Like I got the patch, that was amazing. You just have to keep up with your water intake. So, all right, that will do it for today's show. Thank you for following along on our trip to Alaska. And please let me know if you have questions below. And I will see you next time on the Magical Travel Adventure channel. Bye.